Admittedly, some of these atrocities appear not to have been state-ordered, but the war in Eritrea was ultimately of Selassie's making. Unsurprisingly, by the early 1970s, despite the general positive view of Selassie internationally, civil rights groups such as Freedom House were declaring that Ethiopia was moving towards being a repressive, authoritarian regime where human rights were being contravened. By the early 1970s, Selassie's rule and government was becoming increasingly unpopular among substantial sections of the population of Ethiopia. He still garnered support amongst traditional groups such as the church and the nobility, who had much to lose if the old imperial order was overthrown, but many others had no affinity for the ancient ruling dynasty. This disaffection was further compounded in 1972 by the onset of a new severe famine in Ethiopia. This time it was centered on Wollo province in the north of the country near Tigray. This was brought on by drought and was compounded by an inadequate government response and a failure to import extra foodstuffs and deliver them to the affected areas. It is estimated that between 40,000 and 80,000 people died in Wollo and the adjoining regions in the course of 1972 and 1973, while the competition for resources exacerbated ethnic tensions here between groups such as the Oromos, Afars and Somalis. What was worse, news soon spread that, at the height of the famine, foodstuffs which were actually being successfully produced in Wollo were being exported out of the region to Addis Ababa and other parts of Ethiopia. Eventually, the unrest at Selassie's reign began to boil over. Perhaps this was unsurprising. In 1972, as famine was gripping Wollo, the emperor had turned 80 years of age. He had been in power, in one form or another, for over half a century, albeit as regent for the first 10 or so years and with a hiatus between 1936 and 1941. The first signs of disturbance arose in January 1974 when garrison soldiers in the town of Negeli Borana mutinied over a lack of clean drinking water and poor paying conditions. In a symbolic gesture, they detained one of their commanding officers, Lieutenant General Derese Dubale, and made show of him having to drink the water they were forced to consume. This resonated with many across Ethiopia, who were disgruntled at the rigid social structure which prevailed in the country, and the perception of there being an elite of individuals who were connected to Selassie's regime. In early February, as news of the mutiny spread, protests and insurrectionary movements developed across the country. Crucially, many elements within the military and the police services joined the disturbances. This augured ill for Selassie,